The rainy conditions will be across Wales this evening. A few heavy bursts developing as it sinks southwards. Temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, though, this evening. It will also be cloudy and damp across the Midlands, with splashes of rain moving southwards. Temperatures around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, but falling later as clearer air moves in from the north. Clear skies for northern England this evening once the rain has cleared, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Most places will become dry, but feeling much colder as temperatures continue to fall. Heavy showers across much of Scotland, these falling as snow over the tops of the mountains. A strong and gusty northerly wind too. The clearest weather will be towards the southeast. Showers also expected across Northern Ireland. Some could be heavy, with some hail too. Feeling much colder with temperatures in single figures and a brisk northerly wind around the coasts. And tomorrow, the colder air continues to move south overnight tonight, with showers towards the coasts, a patchy frosty across northern areas, and that is the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest, fun news debate on TV where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage. I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Coming up this evening, with Austria locking down the unvaccinated and other European states considering their options, I'll be asking whether this latest move is a dividing line. We meet this week's Great Britons, a mother and son duo this week who've raised thousands for charity. And I'll be joined by the journalist Nick Wallace, who spent a decade working with the campaign to bring the massive injustice that was the Great post office scandal to light. That's all to come on Neil Oliver Live. But first, your latest news headlines.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts. These are your latest headlines. Demonstrators have blocked 2 areas in London in a show of solidarity for 9 jailed Insulate Britain protesters. They're describing the so-called Highway 9 as political prisoners. Arrests have been made at Vauxhall Junction and police are diverting traffic away from Lambeth Bridge, where 40 people have staged a sit-down protest. 4 of them have glued themselves together. Insulate Britain spokesperson Craig Scudder told GB News many environmental groups are now backing their campaign.
What we're experiencing today is not an Insulate Britain thing. This is, I think, going to be a show of ordinary people from a variety of different environmental groups and backgrounds just coming to push back and rebel.
Video has been released purportedly showing missing Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai having dinner with friends. The video, which can't be independently verified, was posted by a state media journalist on Twitter. It doesn't give details on when the footage was taken. The Wimbledon doubles champion disappeared nearly 3 weeks ago after accusing a former top government official of sexual assault on social media. The Women's Tennis Association welcomed the video's release but said it remains unclear if Peng Shuai is free and able to make decisions and take actions on her own. Taxpayers could be liable for up to £335 million after a government-backed bank failed to properly scrutinise collapsed lender Greensill Capital. An MP's report found British business bank checks on the company were woefully inadequate. Former Prime Minister David Cameron was an advisor, and it's emerged that he used his position to make dozens of calls to senior government officials, including the Chancellor. He tried to secure funds during the pandemic before the lender's collapse, leading to several investigations. At least 2 people were injured when Dutch police fired warning shots during riots in Rotterdam. Water cannon were also used to disperse crowds demonstrating against tighter coronavirus restrictions. The government says it wants to introduce a law that allows businesses to restrict the COVID pass system to those who are fully vaccinated, excluding those who test negative. There's doubt surrounding Novak Djokovic's place at the Australian Open. That's after officials confirmed all players will have to prove that they've been double jabbed to compete in the tournament. The Grand Slam champion has repeatedly refused to disclose his vaccination status. The 34-year-old Serb has suggested he won't play if the vaccine ruling is enforced. You're right up to date. Now back to Neil Oliver Live.
Mark Twain said history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. For 5 days this week, Austria locked down its unvaccinated people. Almost 2 million were only allowed out to work and to buy food and such. Many of those unvaccinated were therefore working in shops and cafes and restaurants and so on, as lowly servants, if you will. But as soon as their shifts ended, they could not be in those same places, certainly not as customers. Even before getting to the morality or otherwise of such rules, on what planet does that strategy even make sense? They were fit to serve the vaccinated their coffees and to bag their purchases, but they were deemed otherwise unclean and unfit to be mixing with the good, clean people. Austrians interviewed on the street were frighteningly unconcerned, unmoved, even supportive of the social hobbling of their fellow citizens. The virus must be stopped, they shrugged, ignoring or unaware of the fact no available vaccine fully prevents catching or spreading COVID. It seemed clear to me that the move was not about health, but about compliance and obedience, or rather, yet another bid to tackle and subdue the stubborn refusal to comply and to obey. Do as you're told. Now the authorities have the whole population locked down once more. Presumably, some bright spark somewhere had the notion that stigmatising and segregating the unvaccinated might have the desired effect, but it certainly wasn't going to halt the spread. Certainly not in Vienna, where a brothel offers punters 30 minutes with the lady of your choice, and I'm quoting there, in return for taking the jab. Here we have women placed on a par with kebabs, burgers, ice cream, lottery tickets, and the rest of the freebies offered as inducements to compliance. This is not about health, certainly not the mental and physical health of those women. Trafficking of women for sex work is a feature of modern slavery across the world, but maybe we don't care about that. Instead, we turn a blind eye while men queue up to take a medical procedure and then help themselves to a woman. Left unsatisfied, Austria's elected officials felt they had to flex their muscles some more and announced that in February it will be compulsory to accept the vaccine. No jab, no alternative at all. Other countries, Germany, the Czech Republic, Greece, Italy, are on the same path as Austria towards locking down the unvaccinated. Perhaps those governments will also opt to make vaccination compulsory sooner rather than later. It seems frighteningly clear to me that the authorities in Austria and elsewhere are looking for scapegoats now, people to blame for a virus that won't comply or obey either. Infection rates in many of those countries where the greater part of the population is fully vaccinated with 2 or 3 doses are rising fast. Gibraltar is one of the most vaccinated regions on the planet, so too Israel, and yet infections continue to increase in both places. Rather than consider the possibility that the months-long strategy is not the right one, or to at least concede it's not having the predicted effect, it's easier to push blindly ahead and point the finger of blame at someone else. History shows bad governments often look for people to blame, often some of their own people. Uniting a large part of the population against a smaller part, giving frightened, angry people a focus for their frustrations and also for their disgust is as old as the hills. If the 20th century has a lesson for us, a lesson that ought to be as permanent, as indelible as any scar or tattoo, it is that encouraging citizens to regard a minority of their fellows as unclean, as vectors of disease, generally ends badly for everyone. In Poland in 1941, there was a propaganda campaign that spread the message that Jews spread typhus, a lethal disease. Blaming an identifiable minority for the spread of a disease is a ghost we should have laid to rest long ago. But here it is, back again. It turns out it never went away at all. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The tone is changing across Europe now, reverting in many ways to the rhythms of an old tune. Can you hear the drums yet? The tumbrils? What troubles me most of all is that there has been not a word of condemnation of Austria's decision from our leaders, not even the sounding of a note of caution. Where too are the faith leaders? You need look no further back in history than the 20th century, when churches turned their back on those made outcasts. Now Durham Cathedral has declared that some Christmas services will be only for those holding NHS vaccine passports. I'm not sure how that fits with Matthew 25:35. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. How on earth have we got here, and so quickly? Austria, a supposedly liberal modern democracy, has decided to assume full rights over the flesh and blood of its citizens. A government in 21st century Europe has decided it has the final say over what chemicals go into the bodies of those citizens. There's no way of denying that that is the crossing of a Rubicon. Once people have to surrender control of their bodies to the state, those people are in a different world, a world in which they are not autonomous beings but puppets on strings. It's also likely a world from which there is no turning back. Some will say, well, they can leave the country if they don't like it, go live somewhere else. But where in the world to go? In the 20th century, there were still places to go in the world to escape situations and regimes that had become unlivable and a threat to life. But what if the whole world changes in the same way? What if all the world becomes Austria? I want to hear our government condemn the decision taken by their counterparts in Austria. At the very least, I want our government to promise, on whatever is holy to them, that no such laws will ever be passed here in Great Britain. If they will neither condemn nor swear an unbreakable oath, then the only conclusion to be drawn is that they're watching to see how it goes in Austria and elsewhere, perhaps with a view to following suit. Over the last 20 months, there has grown an unmistakable note of contempt in the words of some politicians. Last week, Health Secretary Sajid Javid had a question from someone on Twitter, someone concerned that after having had 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, he was now being offered the Moderna variant as a booster. Javid's reply in its entirety was, "So what? How about you show some respect for the NHS? So what? How about you show some respect?" Open brackets, insect, close brackets. And this level of contempt directed at someone already taking the medicine as instructed. All of this from the Health Secretary, a servant of the people when I last looked. How about you don't ask any questions and just do as you're told? From a politician elected to serve the people at our expense, I say that's across the line into a place elected representatives should not go. History rhymes. We lament the chattel slavery of our past while turning a blind eye to women and children trafficked for sex, children in deadly dangerous mines in the Congo, harvesting the cobalt for our phones and electric cars, making the cheap clothes we wear once and throw away. We turn blind eyes and deaf ears to uncounted numbers of girls raped and abused in Rotherham and other towns all over England for fear of upsetting community relations. We promise never to forget the Holocaust, while simultaneously turning a blind eye to the abuse, perhaps genocidal abuse, of the Uyghur Muslims in China. We're already being encouraged to turn a blind eye to the locking down of Austria's unvaccinated. Will we turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to compulsory medical procedures for her citizens? Will we remain silent while such a dark tide slides ever closer to our own shores, one country at a time? He who remains silent is deemed to have granted his consent, or so the old tenet goes. Will we remain silent, or will we speak up loud and clear and truthfully? Martin Luther King said we have a moral obligation to disobey unjust laws. Will we speak up to withhold our consent? Will we disobey unjust laws? And if we will not, then who are we? With me on this evening on my panel, author and presenter and journalist Jasmine Birtles.
Hi.
And comedian and commentator Abby Roberts.
Hi, Neil.
Hello and welcome to you both. It's lovely to have you here. You had me there. Of all the twists and turns of the COVID story, this news from Austria about compulsory mandatory jabs scares me most. What about you, Jasmine?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, as you say, we've crossed a Rubicon here. And I say we because it's Europe. And as you say, other countries, including ours, I think are watching what's happening. And it is extraordinary that Austria, with no sense of irony, certainly no sense of history, as you've mentioned, is saying that they are going to mandate a vaccination, so-called vaccination. You know, other people call it, don't say that it's not a vaccination, it's simply a gene therapy. And they're mandating this, it's still something that is being tested to all of their citizens. But what I think, in all honesty, is the fundamental here is that all the countries, Austria and other countries, are looking to the so-called vaccine passport, in other words, a digital ID system. That, to me, is the point of it. It's not the vaccine. The vaccine's a sort of a way to get us to that. But they're looking for a China-style digital ID that can control everybody.
You're nodding your head there.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Do you see the vaccines as a key to unlock a door into the world of digital ID?
Yeah, exactly. And we're slipping. I mean, the vaccines are being used to, as Yasmin quite rightly says, to get into that situation where all of a sudden we go, oh, this is how we're living our lives now, where we have all our medical status and other details that the state has no business knowing.
Why has China become a desirable model?
I think people...
Right.
People have forgotten communism.
Yes.
People have literally gone, oh yes, the 20. It's really extraordinary. It's like communism has been rebranded into something, you know, with a bow round it.
Yeah.
People go, oh, but actually,
What's
people
about?
care about each other, and it's all to do with large groups. And what could be possibly wrong with that? And we've forgotten the sovereignty of the individual, the sanctity.
Stalin, was he really so bad?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Jasmine, Abby's saying, you know, we're forgetting the 20th century, but it's the technology of the 21st century that's facilitating and enabling this.
Yeah.
You know, it's not as though we're looking back to something that might have been forgotten by a generation. I mean, what is the appeal? I simply don't understand what the appeal is of looking at a population that is photographed, monitored, surveilled, marked out of 10 and controlled in that way. Why is that seen as a desirable by anyone in the West?
Well, I think what it is, it's going back to the age of, well, you know, what you will know very well about, the medieval times, when you have a very few kings and nobles, and then the rest are just serfs. And I think, honestly, that is the plan. We currently have, of course, big pharma, big tech. We do have a few multi-billionaires. And I think the idea, really, is for them to run things and the rest of us to be their serfs. And the best way to do that is to keep tabs on everybody. And, of course, you know, as we've heard from Charles Schwab, you will own nothing and you will be happy. However, a few, just a very few, will own those things that you will happily be renting from them, and then hopefully, you know, you'll have some sort of a life, as much of a life as they are allowing you. And by the way, as you mentioned, I'm a journalist, I'm a financial journalist, and one other way that this is going to be underpinned is to have what's called a CBDC, central bank digital currency, which is kind of based on some of the cryptocurrency elements, many of the clever ones. But unlike cryptocurrency, which is decentralized, with a CBDC, all the money is funneled through the central bank, in other words, really government, honestly. And they will have total control then over everything that we earn, everything that we spend.
And in a system such as you describe, there is no cash as such, is there?
No.
All transactions are simply electronic, so you can't reclaim your wealth and hide it under the mattress or keep it in a box.
Exactly, and not only that, but you know, as I say, I am a big fan of cryptocurrency. Love it; it's great fun. But you know, some of the clever little things that you can do, for example, with Ethereum, would be used for bad, I think, in bad ways by governments. So, for example, you can put a smart contract on the money so that it says, you have to spend this money in the next 2 weeks, or this money has to be spent, you know, there. And if you don't, it's gone. And that's what you can do with digital money. But as you say, you can't with cash, which is why I am now really pushing cash. I'm joining any campaign. I'm setting up campaigns to keep cash going so that we have some sort of autonomy.
And what do you feel about that, Abby? Are you going to start stashing the cash?
I can start sending the cash. Already started. I mean, as a stand-up, you know, at gigs, you're paid in cash. Largely, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
you know, we're sort of like the last. I mean, it is stand-up. Stand-up is basically, you know, the free market. You know, working still. But I mean, it's interesting. The idea of cash versus. I think people have forgotten really good ideas to do with the individual versus the state. That's what's happened. We've sort of. And not enough people. I mean, the left. Sorry to sort of put them, you know, everyone into that category. Are shouting a lot louder than the small c classical liberal conservatives, as has always been, you know, the case. And we just need to start standing up for the man, you know, the individual.
Yeah, and I think you're right.
Not
about,
a number.
You are right about. I think, you know, communism has been given a nice little sheen, bless it.
Yeah.
And it's happening in schools and universities. I do think that there's a general sense that what is taught to kids is that it's all right. What's bad is fascism. But of course, you know, it's quite all right.
Now, you were both, I think, on the march today in London, protesting. And you had, I think you've got some footage you were able to provide us with, some, you know, just some colour, just to give us a sense. There we go. There's a sense passing. That's the Palace of Westminster. There.
Yes, there were several thousand.
Is there a protest fatigue? I mean, people have been protesting and taking part in these marches week after week after week. Is there loss of energy or
not?
not?
The thing is, actually, it's a really fun thing to do. There's a very, very happy, freedom-loving sense about it. You can't see the colourful fireworks and things. There's that colourful smoke sometimes to do. There's music going. We're all on the same page. So there is a happy sense there. What I think the fatigue element comes when we find that when you've got hundreds of thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of people on these marches, and it's completely ignored by mainstream media. There is nothing at all. What you need, of course, is somebody to throw something and somebody to have a bit of blood. That would be the only time that media would cover it.
Do you think, Abby, that it's generally overlooked by the mass of the population that these protests are happening, not just here but across Europe? Or do you think the awareness of the level of opposition is becoming more generally known?
I think so. I hope so. I hope that the tide is turning slightly. Maybe that's my optimistic side. The one thing that the media doesn't do us any favours is calling everybody anti-vaxxer. They position it in a way that, we're all crazy, we're all nutters, we're all... and all the people, like I said, it's a very emotional. I got very emotional. I've been on all of them probably, but all the marches last year. And I love the fact that if everyone's from any walk of life, any class, any... and
age.
And you feel almost sort of uplifted. Like this is our testimony. History as you know, Neil, there are times when you have to stand, it calls you, something calls you. And obviously I can't speak for everyone else, but, I haven't been able to be silent. So it's...
And it is true, because the posters that a lot of people were holding was against vaccine passports. Now, you have people who've been vaccinated on every other type of vaccine, but it's this particular one, which is, as I say, untested and being effectively forced on people. The other vaccines weren't forced, one or two if you go to Africa, but this one, it's untested, not properly tested, it's being forced on people, and it's the vaccine passport element.
Yes, and I think it's also whether or not, leaving aside the efficacy of the vaccines, or indeed, the fact that they haven't been through the complete, testing and reporting and all the rest of it. But I always sense that for most people, it's the coercion.
Yeah.
I don't think there are many people who simply don't like being coerced. In relation to anything.
Yes.
Where there has to be an element of, I think in a free society there has to be an element of choice, and one of those choices has to be no thank you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realise that unvaccinated now includes the people who've had the two jabs.
Well, it's a moving target.
Yeah, it really is. It's a moving, and that irritates a lot of people as well. You go, well, come on, I've done my bit. What, you mean I have to do it every 6 months and then maybe every 5 months and 3 months? Hello?
Obviously, this is something that we will pick up and augment throughout the run of the show. But moving on, we like to hear from you on Neil Oliver Live. So please keep your tweets and emails coming in to us. You can email gbviews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at gbnews, and I will try to get to as many of your messages as I can later in the show. After the break, what do those who live in Austria think of the latest lockdown? We'll be speaking to one British expat who's been caught up in it all. But first of all, here is the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like a much colder day than we have seen for quite some time. Let's take a look at the details. A sunny start for many across southwest England, but also a cold one. A few showers are possible, being driven in on a brisk northerly breeze. Temperatures around 6 Celsius. Any morning frost will quickly clear from southeast England. A sunny but cold start to Sunday morning, with the winds a little lighter here. Heavy showers will affect northern and western parts of Wales, some heavy with the risk of hail, driest and sunniest in the south and east. The Midlands will be largely dry but cold first thing tomorrow morning. Northwest England will also be largely dry and sunny, perhaps the odd shower towards the west coast. Morning highs of 7 Celsius. Cloudier skies are expected across northeast England, with showers running along eastern coasts. Some of the showers will be heavy at times, with the risk of hail. A cold and brisk northerly wind. Heavy showers across northern Scotland will continue through the morning, falling as snow over the mountain tops. Clear and frosty to begin across southern Scotland, but with lighter winds here. Northern Ireland will see plenty of sunny spells, but it will be a chilly start to the day, with the risk of a few showers too, a brisk northerly wind. Towards lunchtime, scattered showers will feed further south across the far east and west of the UK, with sunshine in between. And that's how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now let's return to the COVID pressure European countries say they're facing as we inch into winter. With me all the way from Salzburg in Austria is journalist Alex Story. Thanks for joining me, Alex.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for being there. Simply, first of all, Alex, what is the mood among the general public about what's happening so very quickly in Austria at the moment in terms of lockdown for the unvaccinated and now the news about, mandated vaccines? What are people saying?
Well, the interesting thing is that you have 2 factions, which is essentially where you don't want to get to in a society. You have those people who are vaccinated who think that the enemy of the state are the unvaccinated, and the unvaccinated who are looking onto the people who have been vaccinated as those big bully boys who are forcing them to do something that they might not want to do. So the mood is one of suspicion, and this is really what I think is the real damage, the long-term damage, not just for Austria or for Germany or for Switzerland or all the neighboring countries, but for the Western world, where we get used to a concept that your neighbor is the enemy. And this really takes us back to a German socialist way of thinking, which is that there are bad people in your society that need to be dealt with. In other words, it's not a pleasant place to be at the moment.
It does feel so short-termist, and the governments seem to be feeling the need to do ever more dramatic and ever more severe things in order to get to where they want to be simply tomorrow, without considering, as you say, by creating these kinds of divisions between segments of the population, those kinds of abysses, those kinds of wounds, it's anyone's guess how you get beyond them and how you heal the hurt.
Well, it's particularly true given that Western governments have not been covering themselves in glory for the last 30 to 40 years. I mean, that's really the background to all of this. If you are Austrian or German, you've been told that there is officially no inflation, but you know that your pay packet is shrinking at a rate of about 6 to 10% a year, and it has been doing so since 2008. And so it's also the same governments that are telling you that when in 2010 there were only 2 genders, they're now 58 or an infinity. So you're dealing with a political context which is against trust, and this is essentially the reason why there's such an issue. In the end, people don't believe their politicians, they don't believe their governments, and the reason for this is not because the citizen or the subject is a fool, it's because the subject and the citizen is not a fool, because they remember what they were promised 10 to 15 years ago, and what they remember what they were promised 5 years ago or 1 year ago, but the pitch keeps changing and the landscape remains the same. So in the end, I think the citizen finds himself in a position of thinking, who do I back? And it's not going to be the state.
Yes, no, I think that's a palpable sense here. Also, the pandemic, COVID, and also talk about how to deal with climate changes has, for many people, intensified a sense where they feel they're not being invited to be part of a conversation, but they're just being spoken down to and hearing one diktat after another. Bear with me, Alex, while I bring in Sally Cutler. She's a professor of medical microbiology at the School of Health, Sport and Bioscience at the University of East London. Thanks for joining me this evening. Good evening. From your perspective, why is Austria, in this instance, seen to be going to such extreme lengths?
At the moment, they're in a medical crisis with the number of cases that they've actually got of COVID. And so they're finding that the hospitals are full, which means that they've got to take drastic measures because they cannot cope with more cases to manage at this point in time. And so this is why they've taken these rather drastic measures of doing the lockdown for the unvaccinated individuals, in the fact that those are the individuals that are much more likely, if they become infected, to end up in hospital and potentially need a lot of support and maybe even lose their lives. And so they're trying to keep the population as safe as they possibly can. And yes, it's an unfair situation in the fact that they're doing one rule for people that are vaccinated, another rule for people that are not. And I can understand how this is a way that goes against all of our civil liberties, our freedom of choice, all kinds of things like that. There are all kinds of societal issues that are raised by this way of managing the population.
Sally, to some extent, I could understand, not necessarily, well, I wouldn't approve, but I could understand if the lockdown was such that the unvaccinated people were completely removed from society and not coming into contact. But the fact is, the unvaccinated are able to go to work, and they are able to be out, although in a limited form. Now, if what you say is true, that they are the vectors and they are the dangers, then why is it okay to be served a coffee by someone at 5 to 6, and then at 6 o'clock when that person's shift finishes, to need them to disappear as though, through an invisible trapdoor in the floor? You've been in their company anyway, so it doesn't seem to me like anything that's based on any kind of medical science. It seems more like something that's about punishing and trying to secure obedience and compliance by making someone's life uncomfortable.
There are certain circumstances where there are higher risks, and a lot of that tends to be when we're socializing, when we're relaxing. If you go out for a dinner at a restaurant, for instance, obviously you're not mask wearing because you're eating. You're sat down in a sort of indoor environment where
you're being served by someone who's unvaccinated. But,
Sorry?
but you'd be being served in that instance potentially by a waiter or a waitress who's unvaccinated. So, in what way is there an internal logic to saying that the unvaccinated can come and work, can come and serve, can come and bring you your drinks and your meal, and then at the end of their shift they have to go away and pretend that they don't exist?
But the unvaccinated individuals would not be in that environment because they would be allowed to go to work, allowed to go out and exercise and essential shopping. And beyond that, my understanding is that they're not allowed to mix and mingle to keep them safer. So it's trying to get that balance between giving limited freedom to the ability to go out, get your food, shopping, for instance, your ability to go to work still, but to try and restrict everything else as much as possible to minimize those risks. In a workplace environment, there are usually quite good controls that have been implicated and instigated. So basically, people are going to be hopefully wearing masks in indoor environments. There'll be risk assessments there for that work environment to try and reduce transmission. So basically, the likelihood of actually acquiring your infection during that workplace is probably not as high as when you're relaxing in a much more social environment. You're going to a pub, you're going to a bar or a restaurant or something like that. So those are the more high-risk situations that they're trying to restrict and limit.
Alex, when you listen to Sally, what Sally has to say there from the point of view of a scientific explanation for what's going on, does it make sense to you? Does it ring true to you as a logical set of measures to try and protect the health service in Austria?
Absolutely not. I think if we go back to Thomas Aquinas, the first step to resolving issues is logic. What I've just heard is not logic. It's pre-Roman paganism. It's essentially creating small rules for small groups of people that make sense. So for these people, we can have child sacrifices. For these guys, we'll just sacrifice goats and everything else. There's no logic to what I'm hearing. And in many ways, we all know, because we've been living through this charade for the last 2 years. We know who the victim group is. We know that it's the elderly, and in Austria, most of the elderly are vaccinated and they've been fully vaccinated. We also know it's the people who are obese. So we also know that these people have been mainly looked after. I'm a former Olympian. I can outrun pretty much anybody on the pitch. There's nobody on this in your studio or just outside of GB News that is fitter than I am. The likelihood of me dying or being impeded by COVID is diddly squat. And we also know that the numbers of people who have died in Austria from the COVID virus is 0.001%, which is slightly above what we had in Switzerland, slightly below what we had in Germany. It's below what we had in Italy, France, and the United Kingdom. The fact that you are deciding from a very subjective point of view that some people are allowed to do certain things and others are not, it's essentially the definition of Mussolini or Hitlerian or Stalinist fascism. That's what you're doing, and what you're creating by pretending that there is a scientific basis to something that is blatantly not scientific is you will plant the seeds of some real ruptures in society that you will pay for.
Sally, how do you react to that? The idea that science is not that this is not scientific, and that science, I think Alex is saying, is a kind of a gloss that's being laid over illogical steps, by a government desperate to be seen to be doing something.
The scientific data strongly supports that the vaccination is effective at actually reducing hospitalizations. Sadly, it's not effective at totally stopping that community transmission, but it can reduce community transmission at least by 50%, which is good. So the vaccine is safe. It protects from serious consequences, hospitalizations, death. And so to actually encourage as many people as possible to actually partake in having the vaccination is a good way forward to try to actually keep our life going, to keep our society going, to keep our economies going, and to protect each other. So that is really sort of why we're trying to promote the vaccination, why we're trying to engage people into looking at the data, looking at the protection that they can actually achieve through actually getting vaccinated. So basically, the vaccination rate has improved quite significantly in Austria now. I think they're up to about 66% of people that are now fully vaccinated, but they've been a little bit slow in getting there, which is possibly why they're seeing this huge surge in infections at the moment. And so basically they have to deal with that immediate problem that is there in front of them now, this huge surge of infections. And that is crippling their health service. They need to make sure that they've got the capacity to deal with health emergencies as and when they come in. At the moment, they're going to be really stretched to do that. So they're having to take emergency measures.
Sally, as a medical person, what is your feeling about compulsory vaccination? That there being no option.
I'm not a fan of compulsory vaccination. I think that people should hopefully be able to look at the data, look at the protection that vaccination will afford them, and make that informed decision based on the data.
But let's face it, 2 million, the totality of 2 million people.
Is going a step too far.
Surely you can't imagine that the totality of 2 million people approximately who haven't so far, who are unvaccinated, are going to look at the data, as you say, and come to that decision which the state requires of them. You know, we are surely contemplating a situation where medical professionals have to give a medical procedure to people who haven't given their informed consent.
Can I jump in?
The whole basic ethics that we all have signed up to. Ethics should be absolutely paramount, and to actually give people a vaccine against their will, that is taking it a step too far in my book.
So that's a step too far. Alex, you wanted to come in there.
Well, yeah, because the point is, I write, I look at data constantly on a variety of very complex issues, whether it's GDP growth or whether it's innovation or whatever it is. And you and I all know that data can be interpreted in different ways by different people, given their circumstances. So when somebody tells me, look at the data and make your decision, I will look at the data and make my own mind up. So if I work in the investment world, you give me data and I'll say, great, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else. So if I tell you that I've looked at OECD data and the European Center for Disease Control, and I'm telling you from the data that I've gathered, which is official data, that what you're doing is absolute nonsense and it's completely mad. And what you're doing is you're creating a two-tier society and it's extremely dangerous. You then telling me that I'm not looking at the data right tells me that what you're actually looking for is you're looking for subservience. And this is something that is completely unacceptable. I don't want to have to be told by somebody that I don't know that there is a split that's going to happen between my wife and me, because the 2 million people who live in Austria are not just a bulk of 2 million people who live in the country. There are maybe 3 million households where you have husband and wife who have different views on healthcare. And this is the way that life is, right? So you're asking and you're backing the Austrian Republic to jump into a family setting and splitting the family. In other words, you're not asking in a benign way for people to look at the data. You're saying, look at the data, but if you don't agree with us, you won't be able to work, you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to go into a restaurant with your own spouse. You're backing 1930s. You're backing, just to be clear, you're backing 1930s German socialism views. That's what you're doing, and you can quote it whichever way you like. This is what you back. And it's nice that we have a station where we can discuss this and where you can clean. But this is what you're doing. There's a two-class system in terms of subjects or citizens, and you're
Sally, is that not true? Are we not moving inevitably, in the case of Austria, to a segregated society, which surely can't be in anyone's interests?
It is a segregated society, but on a temporary basis. This is an emergency pandemic response. So in an emergency, sometimes you have to do quite drastic decisions, which is what they've done. It's not a permanent thing. It's just the fact that this is what they're having to do now, treating people differentially. They're having to look at the vaccinated and treat them in one way and treat the unvaccinated in another way. This is a short-term thing for a matter of weeks. It'll be continually reviewed and hopefully will not be a long-lasting thing. I think the compulsory mandated vaccination, I've got more of an issue with that. The fact that they're now demanding that everybody must comply, that is more of a problem. So I think that this sort of short-term differential treatment, that literally is just a short-term emergency response to the surge in infections. Just so that the hospitals have still got a bed free if somebody has a heart attack or something like that and needs that urgent critical medical attention. Because at the moment they're going to be hard pushed to deliver that.
But wouldn't you concede, Sally, that if a state sets a precedent whereby it has taken the ultimate decision regarding bodily autonomy, you know, where a state has decided that it will say what you do with your body, you know, you say temporary, you know, that sounds to me like a step that once taken, you know, there may be no way back from that. Once a state has determined that it can make that decision on behalf of individual citizens, I don't sense anything temporary about that. That sounds permanent and like a shift of the world's tectonic plates to me.
I don't think they could possibly do that as a permanent measure. Because
you don't think having exercised that power once, they might be tempted to exercise it again in relation to other things?
I think really this is a response to basically the huge burden of infection they're having to deal with at this point in time. Everything will settle down eventually. Once we gain suitable population immunity, we will not have such a concentration of cases all simultaneously at the same time, which is what's pushing the healthcare service to buckling point. So basically,
Can we just check?
have to deal with this particular emergency, this medical emergency at this point in time when the hospitals are full. They're dealing with this huge number of cases, and they need to make sure that people are not going
Sally,
to lose their lives.
We are running short of time here, but I know that Alex has a point that he would like to make as well. Just before we do finally run out of time on this item, Alex, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really important before we start talking in generalities, because I think our enemy, in terms of a free society, is talking in generalities and not in concrete data. When you say that the Austrian health system is under pressure, can you just give me data? Because I can tell you now, I can drive you and the entire team for GBNews to the hospital in Salzburg. It's about 5 miles down the road, and it's totally empty. So I want to know where the crisis is. I've never seen a hospital just that empty. It's a little bit like in Yorkshire about a year and a half ago. The Nightingale hospitals were all totally empty. So I just want to know where this data comes from. Can you tell me where you got your information about the Austrian system being under stress? And I want to know where it came from and where you got it from.
I have been looking at the figures for Europe, and so I'm not in Austria, so I'm in the UK, so I cannot go into that hospital and say, oh, there's nobody here, it's empty, because I am in the UK. So I don't know that it's totally empty as you described, but from my medical colleagues that I've spoken to through Europe, they are really, really stressed, really pushed at this point in time as they're dealing with these surges of infection. So I disagree with you. I think that actually the hospitals are under stress and strain at this point in time.
Look, both of you
disagree about something that you
both of you,
checked.
honestly, we're just running very short on time here for this item. It's been illuminating and very constructive, I think, to hear both of you, because you're speaking from opposite ends of the argument, and hopefully you feel as if you've had the opportunity equally to share your ideas and your opinions. But thank you, Sally Cutler. Thank you, Alex Storey, and I'm sure this is a story that we'll come back to in the weeks and months ahead. As I say, time is pressing and time is short, and I'll be back after this short break.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather across the UK, turning colder as a weak weather front moves south across the country. Let's take a look at the details. The southwest of England will tend to remain cloudy this evening, with a few spots of rain moving in from the north. Mild initially, but turning much colder later on. Southeast England and the London area will also be on the cloudy side. Initially dry, but outbreaks of rain will arrive from the north. The rainy conditions will be across Wales this evening, a few heavy bursts developing as it sinks southwards. Temperatures around 10 degrees Celsius, though, this evening. It will also be cloudy and damp across the Midlands, with splashes of rain moving southwards. Temperatures around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius, but falling later as clearer air moves in from the north. Clear skies for northern England this evening once the rain has cleared, with a brisk northerly wind developing. Most places will become dry, but feeling much colder as temperatures continue to fall. Heavy showers across much of Scotland, these falling as snow over the tops of the mountains. A strong and gusty northerly wind too. The clearest weather will be towards the southeast. Showers also expected across Northern Ireland. Some could be heavy, with some hail too. Feeling much colder, with temperatures in single figures and a brisk northerly wind around the coasts. And tomorrow, the colder air continues to move south overnight tonight, with showers towards the coasts, a patchy frosty across northern areas, and that is the weather is shaping up overnight into tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Where have you been, in fact? Such a contentious subject. What's happening in Austria? What's happening in countries across Europe? Obviously, Germany, Czech Republic, Italy, Greece, all contemplating or moving in that same direction. Still with me, Abby and Jasmine. Listening to that, I mean, I thought that was a very, let's say, dynamic conversation.
Very
interesting.
What did you make of that very clear split between what Alex was telling us about, as someone who lives in Austria, and what Sally was saying about why the government is doing what it's doing.
I was a bit concerned about the cat that lady had. It sounds like they're being jabbed. Please leave the animals alone, at least. I thought it was extraordinary. It was a bit like she was the Politburo saying the mantra, this is how it's going to be, and he was the rational the rational person. I can't even think of a good. I mean, it's like living, like you said, living in a parallel universe, Neil. Where we know that the language that lady was speaking is sort of newspeak, but we only know that because we've looked through the looking glass.
But she is after all expressing a strongly held point of view.
Yeah.
That is, it's definitely a large part of the argument.
Yeah.
That she was making, that what she was saying there was not in any way out of step with what we're hearing from many voices.
Yeah.
It's credible and it's coming from
because so much is invested in it.
The scientific community. But Jasmine, if I can come to you, can you envisage Britain getting into step with what has happened? Can you see that happening, that we would move to locking down the unvaccinated and or moving to compulsory vaccination?
If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, what are you on? Of course not. No way. So much has happened in the last year and a half, nearly 2 years now, that I would never, ever have imagined happening, including lockdown, etc. That it's not beyond the bounds of possibility. I like to think that we wouldn't. I like to think that we are independent enough, that we think for ourselves, that we have enough of a sense of democracy and freedom and justice. That's certainly how we like to think of ourselves. But you never know. You really never know.
I was unnerved. I think I would be prepared to be corrected. I think it was Dominic Raab on radio this week when asked directly, was that a kind of a plan that Britain would ever have in its armoury or not?
It was,
and he didn't say it wasn't.
He said
made it plain that he wasn't planning to be.
Yeah.
He wasn't expecting to see that happen.
Yeah.
However, he didn't say categorically, over my dead body, or no, that would never happen.
Exactly. He said there are no guarantees, and whoever it was interviewing just sort of mumbled, and I thought, why isn't somebody saying, sorry, have you lost your mind? Why are people not holding politicians to account? Where are the, like I said on Twitter, where are the big hitters, who sort of the politicians fear being interviewed by? That would help. That would help a lot, our cause a lot,
Yeah.
And you feel likewise?
Well, yeah, it doesn't seem to me. Again, I'm going to go back to the
Bear
vaccine.
with me, Jasmine. I'm just being told to move on. Plenty more for you over the next hour, but we're approaching 8 o'clock. We'll have your latest headlines after this short break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion, Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello, I'm Karen Roberts with your latest headlines. 30 demonstrators have been arrested after they blocked Lambeth Bridge in a show of solidarity for 9 jailed Insulate Britain protesters. The bridge has reopened to traffic and a demonstration at Vauxhall Cross has also been cleared. Meanwhile, Vauxhall Bridge is now open southbound. Activists had described the so-called Highway 9 as political prisoners. Insulate Britain spokesperson Craig Scudder told GB News many environmental groups are now backing their campaign.
What we're experiencing today is not an Insulate Britain thing. This is, I think, going to be a show of ordinary people from a variety of different environmental groups and backgrounds just coming to push back and rebel.
Video has been released purportedly showing missing Chinese tennis player Peng Shuai having dinner with friends. The video, which can't be independently verified, was posted by a state media journalist on Twitter. It doesn't give details on when the footage was taken. The Wimbledon doubles champion disappeared nearly 3 weeks ago after accusing a former top government official of sexual assault on social media. The Women's Tennis Association welcomed the video's release but said it remains unclear if Peng Shuai is free and able to make decisions and take actions on her own. Taxpayers could be liable for up to £335 million after a government-backed bank failed to properly scrutinise collapsed lender Greensill Capital. An MP's report found British business bank checks on the company were woefully inadequate. Former Prime Minister David Cameron was an advisor, and it's emerged that he used his position to make dozens of calls to senior government officials, including the Chancellor. He tried to secure funds during the pandemic before the lender's collapse, leading to several investigations. Campaigners at the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic are demanding for post-Brexit arrangements to be protected. The crowd at Carrickcarnan are warning the UK government against triggering Article 16, which would suspend post-Brexit elements currently in place. Unionists have opposed the Northern Ireland Protocol, objecting to the idea of a trade barrier with Great Britain. Negotiations between the UK and the EU are ongoing. You're right up to date. Now, back to Neil Oliver Live.
Hello again, welcome back. On this show, we like to bring you stories you wouldn't find anywhere else, and my next guest is no exception. Ewan Finlay recently completed his apprenticeship to qualify as a cooper to make barrels for Theakston's brewery in North Yorkshire. When Ewan began his apprenticeship, he was the only apprentice cooper in the whole of England. But now he reckons there are as many as 6. That may not sound like much, but it is, after all, a 500% increase. It seems Ewan might be somewhat of a trendsetter. And I'm joined now. I love stuff like this. Jasmine sitting here saying, I thought coopers were gone for good. And, I'm sure that's a commonly held idea. But I'm joined now by the man himself, Ewan Finlay, journeyman cooper at Theakston Brewery. Are you there? Super.
Hello, Neil. Yes, I'm here. How are you doing?
Oh, great. Great to have you. We were just discussing here in the studio that the work of a cooper, it's almost, a lot of people might struggle even to say what it is, and other
not many people
cooperage
not many people my age know what a cooper is. No, when I tell people what I do for a living, they're usually shocked about what it is. They have no idea. I usually just refer to it as a barrel maker. Everyone knows what a barrel is, so that one usually works.
So how did it come to pass? What were you doing before you decided to embark upon your apprenticeship?
It was more or less straight after college. I was working just as like a groundsman for a company doing like grass and all that. And I played rugby for Ripon, and my coach Ian Hassel came up to me one day and says, "Ewan, do you want to be an apprentice cooper?" And just like what you're saying, my initial reaction was, what is a Cooper? And I went home and told my dad about it, and he said, absolutely go for it. So I started being in a Cooper about 7 years ago, and I fell in love with it. I've done it ever since.
And tell me a bit about it. What did your apprenticeship entail? And I suppose essentially, what does a Cooper do, and who does he do it for? Are you hearing me there, Ewan? I'm just. Oh, I think you might have dropped out, Ewan. Honestly, it's. Like you, I share that sense that all of these apprenticeships, all these skills are away, and it's so reassuring, isn't it, to find that like giant pandas are clinging on.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that, when I heard that we were going to talk to a Cooper, it's like, oh, great, because, every now and then you come across a real, genuine stonemason who does genuine, proper stuff. Now, OK, there are more of those than there are Coopers, but it's not something you really honestly come across that much. Thatchers as well. Basically, all those surnames, Cooper, Thatcher. OK, you don't have a Mr. Stonemason, but on the whole, these it's very nice to have them back again.
Ewan, I think you're back with us. We lost you.
Hello. Yes, I'm back.
Tell us what the apprenticeship was like. What was your training, and what is it that you can now do as a Cooper?
Well, basically, before I even started my apprenticeship, it was a 6-month probation period to see if I was up to the standard, to see if I could actually start my apprenticeship. From there, I signed my indentures, which means I was signed on to a 4-year-long apprenticeship. And basically, throughout that, I just learned the ins and outs of making and repairing wooden casks. But I can do multiple other things like tubs and plant pots and everything like that, to be honest. Anything barrel-related I can do throughout my apprenticeship. But my main job is to make and repair and maintain 9-gallon firkins, which are filled with old peculiar, that we sell to the general sell to pubs, so we can sell peculiar to them.
But basically, you can go from just the raw materials and then using traditional skills.
But
how long does it take you to make a barrel then from scratch?
It depends what stage you're starting from. That's the most common question I get asked. It's quite a broad question. It depends ultimately what size cask you're making and what starting point you're at. Is your wood already planed? Are you making a new timber cask? Are you making a remade? But I'm not on piecework, so I don't get paid for every cask I make. So I put time and effort into everything I do and do it properly.
Tell me why it's important to maintain a skill, a craft like that of the Cooper. When I suppose many people would say, well, you could just have beer in metal barrels. You've been through it. You've got the appreciation of it. Why does it matter?
It's not the same. Out of a metal cask, it's just not the same. It doesn't have the aesthetic. It doesn't have the punch to it. Basically, the way I Cooper at Theaksons is I do everything the traditional way. If I didn't do that, there's only a handful of people in the world that still do Cooper in the way I do it. And let alone for a brewery, I'm the only person working directly for a brewery which makes casks that are fit for beer. Because our casks have to be really robust. As they get rolled around, they get chucked into cellars, so they have to be stronger. There's also a secondary fermentation which goes on inside of the cask, which means it has to be able to withhold a tremendous PSI, so my casks have to be extra strong. And if I didn't do the Cooper in the way I do it, nobody else would.
Am I right in thinking that you're doing something that in the old traditional way? I mean, cooperage, as I understand it, goes back to ancient Egypt in terms of making barrels. Are you still using old tools and working in that traditional way?
Yeah, I'm still making casks the way they've done it for hundreds of years. Most of my tools are basically before World War II. The steel was a bit better then, and obviously coopering was a lot more common then. So most of my tools are, they're at least like about 75 years old up to like 100 years old. Some of the truss hoops that I use in the wall date back even older than that. So yeah, everything that I do is the traditional way, doing it, putting a lot of sweat and effort into it. I don't have any machines that help me do it, so it's hard work, but it's good work.
Ewan, it's honestly, I think I say on behalf of everyone here listening to you, it's such a genuine, heartwarming pleasure to hear about the survival of an ancient craft and to see in your face, it's palpable, your enthusiasm and the fact that being a Cooper matters. And so more power to your elbow, and I hope that your story encourages many more people to try and take advantage of that ancient skill. So 1,000 thanks for joining me, and all the best with your future cooperage. Now, we changed direction somewhat. How to get into this one? It's a story that I've been aware of for, I don't know, a decade. It seems to have come and gone from the news cycles. On the 23rd of April this year, the Court of Appeal overturned the convictions of 39 former sub-postmasters and ruled their prosecutions were an affront to the public conscience. Described as one of the worst and most widespread miscarriages of justice in British legal history, it had, between 2000 and 2015, swept more than 700 people into a nightmare that saw them financially ruined, their reputations destroyed, some were sent to jail. Award-winning journalist Nick Wallace came across the story in 2010 and in the years since has gained an understanding of the intricacies and the personal heartbreak caused that's second to none. And Nick joins me now. Good evening and welcome, Nick.
Hi, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, first of all, how you became aware of the plight of these people.
I was working at a BBC local radio station and I got a tweet from a cab firm asking if they could bid for the BBC Surrey cab account. And we were such a small radio station, we didn't have a cab account. So if I had, we would have passed it on to management. But I said something flippant like, why don't you bring some of your taxi drivers onto the show and they can tell us some of the amazing stories they've got. And the cab account tweeted back and said, oh, I've got a story to tell you. Give me a call. So after the programme, I called up the gentleman who sent the tweets. His name was Devinder Misra, and he told me his pregnant wife had been sent to prison for a crime she didn't commit. And it was all down to a computer system which was installed at her post office in West Byfleet. And so after a long conversation, I went to see him the following day, and he told me about a group of people called the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance who were out there who'd all suffered in similar ways. They'd been prosecuted by the post office, which has or had its own criminal prosecution facility. And without the oversight of the CPS, without the oversight of the police, the post office had decided that these sub-postmasters had committed crimes and they were going to be prosecuted for them. But what it turned out to be was a faulty computer system.
But how you make that, that obviously was a long and painful, drawn-out process. Can you talk us through how long it actually took to get from, all these hundreds of people simultaneously saying that they hadn't done anything wrong? How did it get to the point where you were able to get to the stage of overturning these convictions?
Well, Alan Bates, who was the founder of the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance, was sacked in 2003 because he had anomalies with his accounting system. But in a previous career, he'd worked with and designed some of these accounting systems, and he knew that it wasn't him that was making a mistake. But the post office still sacked him. He vowed to get even with them and set up a campaign group. So this was 2004. In 2009, it was given the name the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance after Computer Weekly did a groundbreaking investigation into this story and published it. And then they started lobbying their MPs. And in 2010, the post office was made aware of the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance and the fact that they had the backing of several MPs. However, they did nothing about it. They denied that anything was wrong until in 2012, a group of independent forensic accountants called Second Sight were brought in by the post office to look at their Horizon computer system. And Second Sight found that there were faults, there were errors. So the post office stopped prosecuting people, but they denied publicly that there was anything wrong with the computer system. And they also denied that the 738 people that they'd prosecuted over a period of 15 years had actually false convictions. And it wasn't until Alan Bates got enough money together using litigation funders to bring a civil class action or group litigation with 555 other sub-postmasters at the High Court in 2018, that everything started to unravel. The post office's decision to A, prosecute these people over unreliable computer evidence, and then B, cover it up, basically was brought out in the open. And it wasn't, and there was a couple of seminal judgments in 2019 by Mr. Justice Fraser, where he went into granular detail about the failings of this computer system and concluded after 2 very long trials that it wasn't remotely robust, and then everything flowed from there. So the Criminal Cases Review Commission got involved. They referred the cases back to the Court of Appeal, which is why we saw those scenes on the 23rd of April of the Prosecco cork popping outside the Court of Appeal earlier this year. But it took that long, 2004 to 2021, before the first few people could have their convictions quashed. I was in court on Thursday, a further 6 got their convictions quashed, and I'm back in court at the Court of Appeal on Monday and Tuesday, where there's another hearing.
How many people are still waiting? Are people still in jail, or how many people are still waiting for restitution and justice?
Well, the issue of redress is a pertinent one right now, because the statutory inquiry into what went wrong has just been abandoned by the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance in the last 24 hours, because they say it is not set up to consider the issue of meaningful redress for the people who've suffered. In terms of where we are with the number of people whose convictions have been quashed, we're up to 65. We're expecting that to go over 70. There were 738, as I said, prosecutions which relied on this unreliable horizon evidence. It's a question of finding these people. Some of them have died. Some of them have had mental health breakdowns. Some of them have cut themselves off from society. Some of them have moved on. And actually tracking them down and saying, look, your prosecutions might be unsafe. Do you want to apply to the Court of Appeal to have them quashed? Is a very long and drawn out process. So this is going to trickle on for years. On top of that, none of the people who've had their convictions quashed have yet had full compensation for what the Post Office did to them. The government announced in July that an interim compensation scheme would be set up, and people like the gentleman you're looking at here, Tom Hedges, pouring the Prosecco, received £100,000 as an interim payment. But these people are owed millions in terms of what was done to them, and we still haven't yet had a full and final settlement for what some of these people lost.
It very much sounds as though the fight for justice has a very long way to go, in terms of the numbers of people as you described, and the amount of financial and personal damage that was done to people, their livelihoods, their reputations, the physical and mental health. And it seems absolutely extraordinary that the Post Office would see hundreds of people thrown under the bus rather than contemplate the possibility that a bit of software was dodgy. You know, why were they going to such lengths to protect a computer system at the expense of all these human beings?
Well, as a journalist, you're always taught to follow the money. And at the end of the day, it was about cultural snobbery. It was about intransigence. It was about incompetence. But at the end of the day, it was about money. The sub-postmaster's contract effectively put them in a position whereby any faults in their accounts that they could not explain would be lumped on them. If they complained about the computer system, that was nothing that they had any contractual right to investigate. But because the computer system was operated under a PFI deal by Fujitsu, the Japanese tech company, if the Post Office wanted to investigate the computer system, it would cost them money. They would have to either bring in independent IT consultants, or they would have to pay Fujitsu to do the investigation on behalf of all these complaining sub-postmasters. So they took the decision that actually it's much easier to demand money with menaces from their own sub-postmasters, with the threat of not just losing their incomes, but being prosecuted by the Post Office's own in-house prosecutors, than it was to actually go to Fujitsu and say, look, lads, I think we've got a problem. Can you actually do some work and find out what's going wrong?
Has anyone on the Post Office side been hauled over the coals for any of this? You know, has anyone, has it been laid at anyone's door?
Not a single person in this entire scandal has been held accountable or censured for anything that they have done. And I think that is what sticks in the craw for a number of sub-postmasters who, at the slightest whiff of any wrongdoing, were suddenly hauled through the courts, had their reputations ruined and their livelihoods taken away from them. There are executives at the Post Office. Paula Venables was the chief executive when the situation about the postmasters came to light, and the decisions she took and the statements that she gave to the House of Commons have been proved to be palpably false. She's taken 4.9 million quid out of the Post Office, got a CBE, and moved into a plushy job in the NHS. Now, she stepped down from that. She stepped down from her duties as a non-stipendiary vicar in the Brom and Benefice. She stepped down from her commercial directorships. But she has still not been censured or properly even questioned about what went wrong. Now, she is due to appear at the statutory inquiry where she'll be cross-examined under oath. But I've been following this story, as you say, for more than a decade. And every time I was making a documentary or a program or writing an article about this, I would ask Paula Venables for an interview. Not once did she speak to a single journalist in the 7 years that she was chief executive about the Horizon scandal. And she is a public servant. The post office is 100% owned by the government. And it's this failure of democratic accountability, which I think is at the heart of this scandal. There is just a refusal. There's a problem with corporate governance. There's a problem with rogue organisations without any checks and balances or oversight. But there's also this problem at the very heart of our society where people can make very bad and incredibly damaging decisions. And I'm not just talking about Paula Venables. I'm talking about the entire board of the post office from the moment they became aware that there was a serious problem. They don't have to explain themselves until things go really badly wrong.
You've become it's coming off you like static electricity, how close you have come to this story over the years. And you've now, I think you've committed it to paper, haven't you? You've actually gone the lengths of writing a book about this. And in the process of putting this together, I can only assume that you grew close to at least some individuals as you unpicked the horror story that had unfolded for them.
Well, of course, I mean, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to be moved by some of the stories that you hear down the years. And whilst as a broadcast journalist, you're always taught to be as objective as possible, I've never campaigned for the sub-postmasters. I've just simply told the story. I've simply said what they were saying, and I put that to the post office and look for a response. But when you speak to these people, they are genuine. They are hardworking. They get up at 5 in the morning to prepare their shops for business. They graft every hour God sends in order to try and make a living. They have to have a spotless record in order to become sub-postmasters in the first place. They just want to get on in life. And the basic function of the state is to provide safety and security for its citizens. And yet it was the state that steamrolled innocent people through the criminal courts, shredded their reputations, their mental health, their livelihoods, and their future prospects. I mean, families have been torn apart by this. But the money that, and of course, the traditional image of a sub-postmaster is someone who's maybe lived a little, done a different career, and is looking to work together with their partner in their last job before retirement. These were people who'd built up nest eggs after careers of hard graft, invested into one of the oldest brands in the country, and then trusted that they would be looked after, trusted that the state would help them find a way that they could serve the community, but also move into a comfortable retirement. Some of these people have nothing, and they've been ruined by it, and they are lovely, and they are stoic, they're determined, and I sincerely hope that they will get justice, because now that they've been exonerated in the courts, they are owed an awful lot by the government because of the way that their prosecution was done. I mean, it wasn't until 2019 that Mr. Justice Fraser in the High Court gave the first ruling which proved what these poor sub-postmasters had been saying for more than a decade. And they don't get that time back. And it is incredibly lucky that the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance stumbled upon a brilliant judge who understood computers and who had the clarity of thought to see through the rubbish that the post office was spouting in court.
Nick, it's such an extraordinary story, and it's so greatly to your credit. We hear so much at the moment about journalists and journalism, and just to hear the forensic and humane way that you've gone about this story, and the extent to which you've allowed it to take over your life. Such has been your determination to get to the bottom of it. It's refreshing. It's just refreshing to hear, but it's heartbreaking at the same time to hear that so many people you'd regard as pillars of the community really, have been so damaged by it. But thank you very much for bringing this story to us, and best of luck with the book. Thank you again. A shocking story, I think you'd agree. After the break, we will meet this week's Great Britons. These are the people that we try and turn a spotlight onto as often as we can. People who just, often in extremis, turn a difficult situation into something positive and out of a dark place they find their way into something that casts a light on all of our lives. And stay with us and you will hear another worthy contender for the title of Great Britain.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like a much colder day than we have seen for quite some time. Let's take a look at the details. A sunny start for many across southwest England, but also a cold one. A few showers are possible, being driven in on a brisk northerly breeze. Temperatures around 6 Celsius. Any morning frost will quickly clear from southeast England. A sunny but cold start to Sunday morning, with the winds a little lighter here. Heavy showers will affect northern and western parts of Wales, some heavy with the risk of hail, driest and sunniest in the south and east. The Midlands will be largely dry but cold first thing tomorrow morning. Northwest England will also be largely dry and sunny, perhaps the odd shower towards the west coast. Morning highs of 7 Celsius. Cloudier skies are expected across northeast England, with showers running along eastern coasts. Some of the showers will be heavy at times, with the risk of hail. A cold and brisk northerly wind. Heavy showers across northern Scotland will continue through the morning, falling as snow over the mountain tops. Clear and frosty to begin across southern Scotland, but with lighter winds here. Northern Ireland will see plenty of sunny spells, but it will be a chilly start to the day, with the risk of a few showers too, a brisk northerly wind. Towards lunchtime, scattered showers will feed further south across the far east and west of the UK, with sunshine in between. And that's how the weather is shaping up tomorrow morning.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with me. Don't forget, of course, you can send us your views on any of tonight's stories by emailing us, gbviews@gbnews. Now, it's that time of the show where we meet someone who's just done something extraordinary, is doing something extraordinary. Often people in difficult circumstances, but instead of wallowing in any kind of despair, they turn it around and make it something positive for those around them and the wider community. This week, my guests are Deb Gascoigne and her 15-year-old son, Sam, and they're from Hagley in the West Midlands. Now, Deb was diagnosed with myeloma in 2009, and she's been fundraising for Myeloma UK ever since, and she has raised thousands and thousands of pounds. Sam decided that he would like to do his part as well and set himself the ambitious task of completing 15 challenges before his 15th birthday. Not only did he succeed with 3 weeks to spare, he raised lots more money in the process, and he was awarded the British Citizen Youth Award at the Palace of Westminster in front of his proud family. Deb and Sam join me now. There you are. Hello, both.
Hello. Hi.
You can hear me all right? Good to see you.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Deb, first of all, could you simply start by explaining what myeloma is and how it affects you?
Yeah, myeloma is a blood cancer that sort of originates from the plasma cells. And for me, I've been very lucky, actually, I think. It hasn't had major impacts on me other than the fact I've had to go through 2 stem cell transplants and treatment. But for a lot of people, it can cause extreme tiredness, bone damage, kidney damage, all sorts of things like that.
And yet, despite that, I mean, a lot of people would feel that they had their own furrow to plough and would become quite blinkered, but you turned it out into something where you were determined to not just look after yourself and your own, but to fundraise. So what was the motivation there to get behind efforts to raise money for Myeloma UK?
I think that Myeloma UK are an amazing charity. They're very, very patient focused and very, very research focused. And when I got diagnosed, I needed to be able to take some control over my life because I couldn't control what was happening with the actual diagnosis and the cancer itself. So fundraising for me has been an amazing way of me being able to just sort of take back that control, get people involved and take my mind off the bits of it that are just not much fun, really. You know, cancer's hard no matter what cancer it is, and actually not thinking about it too much can be really, really helpful.
That makes sense. Now, Sam, hello Sam, how are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Now, you've been watching your mum raising money for, well, a lot of years now. At what point and why did you decide that you would put your shoulder to the wheel as well and start doing the same?
Well, a few years ago, we went down to Edinburgh on like a family holiday, and that's where Myeloma UK are based. And I just saw everything they're doing and thought that I could put some help into that as well.
And tell me, I introduced you both by saying that you had set yourself 15 challenges. Can you give us an idea of what those were and how you went about them?
So they were varied. Some of them were easier than others. So my easiest one was probably spending 15 hours on the Xbox, whereas my most difficult one was probably trying to get 15 signed items to auction, which I eventually did.
Mm-hmm. What else? You know, what other were you doing things physical? Were you out, I don't know, cycling or running or climbing hills? What were you up to?
Yeah, so I did, one of my challenges was to do with running, and then another one was to try 15 different sports. So there was a different variety of things that I was doing.
You did 15 hours of sponsored silence as well, didn't you? That was brilliant.
I'm kind of guessing you could almost combine the sponsored silence with the 15 hours on the Xbox. I'm sure that would lend themselves. And how much money have you raised? You know, between you, you know, what kind of sums of money have you been able to put towards Myeloma UK?
So Sam's raised a massive £9,000, which is just outstanding because he started off with a target of 150. And as family and friends, and I haven't done this on my own by any means, we've raised now 160,000.
Goodness.
And my current challenge is to try and raise 50,000 by the time I'm 50 in 3 years' time. So we're at 35,000 with that at the moment.
And I can't let it go without you. You must be very proud, Deb, of having watched Sam receive that award. That must have been a good day.
Yeah, this is award.
Oh yes, an actual medal. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, we were so proud, and you know, for most people at 15, you know, like he says, he's on the Xbox or whatever else, and actually he put himself out massively over the last sort of 2 years to be able to do this and achieve it, and you know, he deserves the credit that he got by receiving this award. So yeah, we're really, really proud of him.
Deb and Sam, it's so lovely. Every week I look forward to this segment. They're always different. You know, it's all sorts of different stories, all sorts of different people from different walks of life, but they're all united by, there's just no doubting that listening to you both talk about, you know, turning what might have been a dark situation into something positive, it's just so uplifting. And I always feel better for having been in your presence. So thanks to you both, and wish you all the best of luck for your future endeavours. Now, it's always a magical moment when a little bit of nature intrudes, if that's the right word, on suburban life. Amateur photographer Gillian Lloyd couldn't believe her eyes when her garden became a meeting place for the best of English countryside wildlife. Now get this, a deer, a fox and a badger, it's not a joke, all spotted happily exploring together in a garden in Tunbridge Wells in Kent. Look at that. There's Reynard the fox. And Gillian Lloyd joins me now. Gillian, this must have been like, I don't know, a scene from Wind in the Willows or a Disney cartoon perhaps. How did you feel when you realised what was happening?
Yeah, well, when we first saw it, we were a little bit sort of taken back and very excited at seeing the deer, especially join the badger and the fox. We hadn't seen it before, and yeah, at first we were just really surprised and didn't really appreciate what we were looking at. But afterwards, we appreciated very much what a rare opportunity to see our garden wildlife together.
It does. It's three species that you just wouldn't imagine would choose to put in time together. You know, what do you think occasioned that unlikely assemblage of wildlife in your garden?
Well, I'm not really sure. I think peanuts help. We give the badgers peanuts, and the fox just comes and helps themselves. They steal from the bird tables as well. So those two seem to get together quite happily, sharing the peanuts. Not quite sure what the deer was after. Maybe it was just curious as to see what the badger and the fox were after.
I love what it does for me, amongst much else, is it reminds me, I mean, I introduced it by saying that they were intruding on suburban life, but of course the truth is the animals were there first, you know, and
yes.
our veneer has been laid over their world, and of course they continue to come into it, because after all, it's their world, and our houses and streets are in the way.
Yes, I mean, it's maybe not quite true that we're suburban. We are sort of bit in the country here, and we have fields around us. We do have a deer park very close as well. So, but they just wander through. We've opened up our garden to allow the wildlife to wander through and walk freely. We know a lot of people, you know, don't particularly encourage the wildlife because they eat their plants, or the fox sometimes is not good for the chickens, and some people don't want the badgers in their gardens as well. But we don't mind. We open the garden up, and if they eat our plants, well, so be it. We just put some more in, and they might eat them too.
It's just so extraordinary. The footage it's almost magical. In the way that the three species there, the badger and the fox and the deer, they're perfectly untroubled by one another. You know,
yes, that struck us too. They just really quite comfortable. The deer was actually making its way closer as well, but something frightened them, and then they all ran off together. But the deer was coming closer. The very next night, we had 2 foxes and a badger in the same place, and then a tawny owl flew into the tree just where the deer is now. We had a tawny owl as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just gonna open this up to my panel. Abby, what do you feel watching that footage?
You
know what I was thinking? It's so calming, relaxing watching those, and it reminds me of you know, the Gary Larson cartoons. You know, where if a human had appeared, they would have gone, quick, pretend that we're, you know, we don't get on. So it's that sort of, that's their little meeting place. It's like an equivalent of a pub.
Yes.
But
I
love that. It does something for me, I think,
does.
to see that the natural world, these species, you know, making their presence felt in our world seems appropriate.
It's great because I live in central London and I love, I like to go for walks late at night sometimes. I love it when you see at the end of the street, there's this fox just looking at you going like, what? Yeah, I'm a fox. What? And they do. They're very happy in town. Yeah. I've got squirrels and yes, some foxes and certainly birds on my bird table. And it's a fantastic thing to have that in the middle of a city.
Yeah. Gillian, that is such a treat. It's magical. It must have been, I'm sure that was an unforgettable sequence of events when you get one little gift walking into the natural world and then a second and then a third. Truly,
absolutely.
You'll be.
It was very magical, and for us to have seen it, we could have easily been somewhere else in the house and not actually seen it. So to have seen it as well and be able to video it was exceptional.
Yes, absolutely a gift, the like of which
it was.
You may not receive again. Gillian, thanks very
much. No, we might.
Lovely, thank you. Now, after the break, have fiction, films or TV programmes shaped opinion on the country of Wales and helped put it on the map? See you after this short break.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello again. Now, there's a phrase out there that runs along the lines of don't believe everything you see or don't believe everything you read. It's often overused, of course. But at an event at the University of South Wales has been looking at how much of Wales' national identity has been shaped, for good or ill, by historical fiction. Imagining History looked into whether fiction, films or TV programmes have shaped opinions on Wales and its communities. It's an interesting thought. Joining me now is Pontypridd-born novelist Catrin Collier, who was part of the two-day event. Hello, Catrin.
Hello, thank you for inviting me on the programme.
Oh no, it's lovely, and I mean, I'm obviously, you know, history, things historical and archaeological. It's a great love of mine, and it's very interesting when an idea like this invites me to think about history, you know, from a slightly different perspective. So tell me, has it been a good thing that we do have, I suppose, in the rest of the UK, an idea about who Wales is?
I think so, and I think through fiction, provided you do your research, you can really get an awful lot of the story of the people behind history and what they've been doing. And I know it sounds strange, but sometimes my fictional characters, I've got the opportunity to portray them doing several different things, and you can combine stories. I've written quite a few historical novels now set in Wales, and I really love it.
What period of history do you have a particular period of Welsh history that you focus upon?
Well, at the moment, I'm in the 1400s with Owen Glyndŵr. 3 years ago, someone asked if I would be interested in working on a project with them, with a view eventually to filming it. And would I write a book about Owen Glyndŵr? I'm now starting the fourth, but I think it will be the last on Glyndŵr. There are just so many stories in Wales that have been forgotten about, like the story of John Hughes that I was talking about at the conference. He was a Welshman, never learned to read and write properly, became a multi-millionaire because he did recognise various gadgets that would improve ironworking, steelworking, became a director of the company that built the SS Great Britain, was invited by the Tsar to go to Russia and build the first ironworks. The Tsar was Alexander II. He wanted to drag medieval Russia, as it was in that time, into the industrial age. And John Hughes went, this multi-millionaire, crossed over with workers from Wales that he'd recruited, slept in a boiler while they trekked over the steppes, which were snow-covered at the time, in a bullock cart. Just looked at this small Cossack village and said, right here, I'll build my ironworks, and he founded a town, which is still in existence now.
You're right, of course. I mean, once you start looking into a country's history, then you open up world after world after world. But do you think that Wales has been helpfully or accurately represented in terms of its depiction in film, in television, or do you think to the contrary?
Not by Hollywood, that's for sure.
In what way? What are the troublesome depictions?
The original How Green Was My Valley, I know a little bit about the story about that because one of my books was filmed by the BBC in 2003, Hearts of Gold, which is now on BritBox, or very shortly will be. And the producer of that grandfather was the only Welshman who acted in that How Green Was My Valley, because it was made at the outbreak of World War II. So Welsh actors couldn't go over there to help them, and bless them, they did make quite a few errors in that, but we let it pass. They got the spirit of Wales, I think.
Good, and what a spirit it is. I mean, I think I would have to say, as an outsider, I have a very warm sense of Wales. I've spent time in Wales. I've made films and told stories about Wales myself, and I think it's got a very positive image in the wider community. Now, but Catherine, bear with me. While we're on the topic of Wales, I'm sure Catherine isn't the only person who's excited about the positive impact of having I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which has obviously been relocated to Wales in these COVID times. Very interesting to consider the impact that a production on that scale has had on the country. Now, the show returns to a castle in North Wales from tomorrow night, and despite the cold weather and the suffering the contestants will experience, a small market town is thriving in its vicinity. Our Wales reporter Lily Hewitson has more.
Come to meet Nikki and Craig at their workshop. They were asked to make 2 of the thrones that you'll see on the programme this Sunday.
Everybody's getting hyped up about it. All the shops are getting involved. Everybody's sort of dressing everything up, and it's getting like a carnival sort of atmosphere, and that's good. It's really what the town needs. This is the second year that I'm a Celeb's been to Abergele, so it's working well, and it does the town really well, because what happens is it's quite seasonal. So you get a lot of holidaymakers during the summer, and this time of the year it peters out, and then obviously the shops are a lot quieter. So this gives it a boost. So you've got all the crew and visitors, and last year the amount of people that were turning up. It's a good thing that something like this, a production of this size, it's come to a small town, because what you tend to find is like Liverpool, they do a lot of films there, you know, big films, and so we've got a small town. And for them to come and invest in it, so like they've come to me to have some upholstery done, they'll go to other local businesses and get little things done. So all the little local businesses are gaining from it.
I think it's great. I love it. I love the huge bugs they've got in the town. I want to own them all. I just think it's nice. It's nice the shops are dressed up. I think it's great for the area. It's bringing money into the area. I think it's really good that the production company are using local businesses. I think it helps create the atmosphere that everybody's sort of working together. And because it's sort of small community, everybody sort of knows everybody. So it's great, you know, so it might be a farmer only taking wood down, but, you know, he's sort of, well, I've took the wood down, so I'm a celebrity.
It's been building up and there's a buzz about it, and like I say, the schools have been doing things, we've been getting ready. So it's just to see, it's just brought a bit more energy to the town at this time of year when, you know, in the build up to Christmas as well, but it's given us something different to focus on, and it's been good. I mean, it'd be fantastic if it did carry on here. You know, it brings something different to it, and it showcases what we have in this country as well, because hopefully they'll be able to get out more in the area this time and not just be in the castle, and you know, see the local countryside and what we have to offer in Wales as a whole, and you know, the whole country. I think it's great.
The show was all focused around the castle, but Grych Castle hasn't always looked so beautiful. Because the show has come here, major restoration work has been able to take place, allowing it to become a major tourist attraction once again.
We've had bumper tourism years for the last few years. The staycation market has boomed, obviously, during the pandemic. But one of the interesting things is Grych Castle, the fairy tale castle in which this production is set, had never really received that many visitors. But as a result of I'm a Celebrity, the visitor numbers are up. And that has given the Grych Castle Trust an income stream so that they can start investing in improving the site. And we're seeing those improvements now coming on in leaps and bounds because of this production. So it's safeguarding local heritage. We're seeing this impact on tourism, not just in the winter months, but in the summer months as well. And of course, you've got lots of people who just want to drive by and have a quick photograph with the castle lit up at night to say, I've been there and seen the I'm a Celeb castle. You know, they just love it.
So during the 1990s, it fell into ruin. It was asset stripped, then it was boarded up, everything was closed down. And the Castle Trust started restoring the woodland walks in 2002. So what you see today is still the ruin, but it's being consolidated. And I'm a Celebrity have put in some floors and roofs over certain parts. So when we reopen next year, the public will be able to come and have a look, especially at the sets. And we've got the throne, which is what Giovanna was crowned upon last year. Well, it's given, I think, a sense of identity back to the town, because it was a historic market town. It was a famous bathing resort in the 18th century. But times change, and what I'm really, really pleased to see is there were so many empty shops last year on the high street, and they've all started to be filled back up because we're getting the tourists back. We're getting people coming from all over Britain just to come to Abergele to see where the castle was filmed.
Of course, the show isn't in Australia again this year because of travel restrictions, but locals hope that I'm a Celebrity will be here to stay in Abergele because of the amazing economic impact the show's had on the local town. Lily Hewitson, GB News, get me out of here.
Brilliant. Catherine, what would it take to make you take part in I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here in your beloved Wales?
An awful lot, I'm afraid. But I'm really pleased that other people are beginning to have a window into Wales to see the fantastic ruins we have, because we always were a troublesome lot. The English had to come and build castles to contain us. So from that point of view, Wales has so much to offer. Maybe not weather-wise, but every other way. And the people are absolutely second to none.
Gwych Castle looks absolutely stunning, and that's a place I have not had the opportunity to visit, and I have to say it looks absolutely perfect, picture perfect. Now we're looking at the set. I think the interior of the castle there. Panel, Abby, what would you take part? Would you be a celebrity on there?
Well, being a proud TAF myself with Robert, oh yeah, I mean it's fantastic. I love the idea that people are, you know, the Wales is just it is a magical place. You know, that everyone sings, everyone drinks. It's wonderful. So I'm delighted.
It is a lovely place, but very, very kind people. I've worked there off and on, and I'm just so impressed by how kind and gentle Welsh people are. And then you look at the past, and you know, as she says, very troublesome peoples and lots of wars and everything.
I agree, and something that fascinates me about Wales, having spent time there, is it's such a small country, and there's so much difference. As you travel north and south, very, very different.
Yeah,
true.
The coast to the west, as opposed to the side where it rubs up alongside England. There's so much going on. In the place. There's and the history is so thick. You've got to bat it away from your face. It's everywhere.
Wonderful.
So do you think it's better? Is it a good place to stage something like I'm a Celebrity as opposed to the outback?
I think it is. Yes. Definitely. I mean, I'm not sure. I was going to say, unless Mark Drakeford, makes it impossible for everyone to actually go to Wales, But I hope that's not the case. I think everyone should spend time there. It's wonderful.
I completely agree. Now, that's all from me this evening. My thanks, as always, to my panel, to Jasmine. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
And Abby, and also to my fabulous guests and the team behind the scenes. I'll be back next week. Next up, it's the wonderful, the beautiful Mark Dolan tonight.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking like a much colder day than we have seen for quite some time. Let's take a look at the details. A sunny start for many across southwest England, but also a cold one. A few showers are possible, being driven in on a brisk northerly breeze. Temperatures around 6 Celsius. Any morning frost will quickly clear from southeast England. A sunny but cold start to Sunday morning, with the winds a little lighter here. Heavy showers will affect northern and western parts of Wales, some heavy with the risk of hail, driest and sunniest in the south and east. The Midlands will be largely dry but cold first thing tomorrow morning. Northwest England will also be largely dry and sunny, perhaps the odd shower towards the west coast. Morning highs of 7 Celsius. Cloudier skies are expected across northeast England, with showers running along eastern coasts. Some of the showers will be heavy at times, with the risk of hail. A cold and brisk northerly wind. Heavy showers across northern Scotland will continue through the morning, falling as snow over the mountain tops. Clear and frosty to begin across southern Scotland, but with lighter winds here. Northern Ireland will see plenty of sunny spells, but it will be a chilly start to the day, with the risk of a few showers too, a brisk northerly wind. Towards lunchtime, scattered showers will feed further south across the far east and west of the UK,